On behalf of the Tools for Life Learning Center at Loudoun Habitat for Humanity, I want to welcome you to today's virtual workshop on fire safety at home. My name is Amanda Bollig, and I'm the Program Project Specialist here at Loudoun Habitat for Humanity. I oversee the home repair program as well as the Tools for Life Learning Center. We're going to jump right in with our goals for today. So first, we're going to learn about some of the fire prevention tools that you should be utilizing in your home. Then we'll discuss some general fire safety tips, and then we'll wrap up the discussion with some other safety concerns that you should address in your home. Joining us today is Lisa Braun-Montalvo. She is the Public Education Manager with Loudoun County Fire Marshal's Office. Lisa is responsible for coordinating and conducting safety presentations for Loudoun County residents so that they're more aware and more educated about the hazards around their home. So thank you, Lisa, for joining us today.
Thank you.
Questions for Lisa during the course of her presentation, you can enter them into the chat box, and then we'll try to answer as many as we can at the end of the presentation. All right, Lisa, I'm going to pass it off to you, and then you just let me know whenever you're ready for your next slides.
Sounds good. Thank you so much, Amanda. Well, thank you everyone for having me join you today. I'm very happy to be here. Today we're going to, like she mentioned, we're going to talk a little bit about fire prevention as well as some tools you should have in your home to be sure that you're protecting yourself and your family. We're going to start off by talking about one of the most important devices to have in your home, a smoke alarm to alert you to if a fire were to occur in the house. We recommend that smoke alarms be located one on every level of your house, outside sleeping areas, and one inside every bedroom. The goal for having so many smoke you make sure that no matter where, as a household member, get notified as soon as possible so you can safely exit the home. Home fires are a little bit different now than they were, 30 or 40 years ago. 30, 40 years ago, people had, 17 minutes to get out of their home safely. Nowadays, with the way homes are constructed and designed, and with the amount of materials we put inside our homes, we only have about 2 to 3 minutes once a fire occurs to get out of that home safely, which is why in all those locations, make sure that they're working. If a lot of homes, we also encourage them to be interconnected if possible. So if a fire starts on the very bottom floor, all the smoke alarms will go into an alert mode and warn you if you're sleeping on, let's say, the second or third floor, because that will give you more time to escape. Now, based on when the home was built, that will determine how many are probably already pre-existing in the house. So if you live in an older home, you may only have one smoke alarm on each level. And that's okay. Obviously, as a fire department, we are going to aim to have you have that gold standard to make sure that you are keeping yourself and your family safe. Go ahead, Amanda. So it's not important to have working smoke alarms in the location, but we need to make sure that they're functioning the way that they're supposed to. And a lot of times, because they're on the ceiling, we tend to forget about them. They're only gonna, make a noise when there's a problem. So we have to make sure that we're testing those alarms one time every month. And a lot of times it's not just hard to remember, but it's hard to reach the alarms because they are high up on the ceiling. So using something like a broomstick handle or a Swiffer handle or something like that makes it a little bit easier to test it every month. When it comes to continuing to maintain that alarm, if you test it and it's functioning properly, that's great. A lot of us have maybe experienced that middle of the night chirping sound, and we're trying to figure out what smoke alarm it is. And we know that, hey, that's the indication that the battery itself needs to be replaced. You can eliminate that middle of the night chirping sound by simply changing those batteries every year before it gets to that threshold. Now, a lot of smoke alarms and things that we're encouraging is to purchase smoke alarms that have a long life battery. So if you decide to choose those types of alarms, the battery will last the entire life of the alarm rather than needing to be replaced every year. So smoke alarms roughly have a life limit of about 10 years before they need to be replaced. So the battery should last that whole period. Just like other devices, smoke alarms need to be cleaned out periodically to remove the dust and dirt, because sometimes something as simple as turning on your heater for the wintertime can blow some dust into the air and cause a false alarm. So making sure that you just, take that, clean that monthly or as frequently as needed to prevent those types of nuisance alarms. As I already mentioned, smoke alarms do have a life limit. So if you think about it, after 10 years, a smoke alarm has been on. And just like any other electronic, eventually they're going to start to wear down and break down. So because it's a life-saving device, we want to change it before it actually goes bad. So after 10 years, or potentially sooner, if you're testing the alarm and it doesn't respond properly, that smoke alarm needs to be replaced. So if you have identified that, you know what, I know my smoke alarms are 10 years old, or hey, you know what, they're not working properly, and you know you need to go purchase new alarms, we provide kind of two very basic recommendations for you to take going forward. As I mentioned earlier, as the fire department, we are always going to encourage you to have that gold standard. But at the end of the day, you need to decide what is going to work best for you and your family. So when looking at alarms, we're going to encourage you to find an alarm that's dual sensor, which means it utilizes both ionization and photoelectric technology. Now, to you, that doesn't mean a whole lot. For us, that just identifies for us the types of fires it identifies more quickly. So ionization, it will identify both a flaming fire and a smoky fire. It just responds to the flaming fire more quickly. And then the opposite is true for the photoelectric. The photoelectric detects a smoky fire much more quickly. Now, if you can only find one or the other, that is okay. And like I mentioned, we just are going to encourage you to, if you can, have that gold standard. Also, any alarm that you purchase should also have the label of an independent testing laboratory. If you look here on the picture, you can see on the left-hand side that there's an ETL with a circle around it. That is an example of one of them. UL is also a common one. FM is another common laboratory. But basically, the alarm having that label identifies that this has met standards that have been set by the fire service, so it should function properly. So we had a question come in where we're asking about the cleaning of the alarms. Do you need to remove the cover or just clean the outside? So if you take the brush tool from your vacuum cleaner, you can take that and just put it over the vent, the little slits in the smoke alarm, and kind of around the edges as well where there's cracks and seals. And if you, as long as you kind of use your vacuum there and brush that out, that should be adequate enough to clean it. You don't necessarily need to take the whole alarm down. You may choose to do that if it's easier, but it's really whatever you're comfortable with. Now, smoke alarms are only good if you have a home escape plan that goes along with them. So when the smoke alarm goes into that alert mode, how are you and your family going to react to that alarm? A lot of people think home escape plans are really straightforward and kind of like one of those things where, like, of course, yeah, I know how to get out of my house. But remember, when a fire occurs when you're at home, a lot of times it can happen at night when you're sleeping. And when you throw in, if there is an actual fire where there's smoke and there's heat and you're waking up from a fog because you're rolling out of bed, when you combine all those factors together, you have an adrenaline rush because you're not sure what's going on because you have the loud alarm alerting. Sometimes that reaction of how do I get out of the house safely isn't there because you're not thinking clearly. So having a plan ahead of time so you can just react rather than having to think through the whole process is really important. So in this example here, basically have a map of your house. Detail out, hey, which room is where, and within each room, identify 2 ways out of each room. Obviously, the easy way out of any room is the door, and then you obviously need to have a second way out and a plan B if the fire is near the door. So usually that's going to be a window. So identify those 2 ways out, but not just identifying how to get out, but where are you going to go when you get outside? So we want you and your family to pick a place that's a safe distance from the house. That's stationary. So make sure it's a tree, it's a lamppost, maybe it's the neighbor's house. And you want to be away from the house where it's safe, where you can wait and make sure all of the family got out safely and got to that location. Because that provides 2 things. One, you know that everyone is safe. But 2, when the firefighters do arrive, you can let them know if someone is missing and we need to go search for them, or if no, everyone's out safe, because that would change how we go and address the fire and put the fire out, and that lets us know we don't need to go and get anyone inside. Every family is different, so there are certain exceptions that you need to take into consideration when making that plan. Thinking of who lives in your household, I have a great example where I have a 1-year-old in my house and she sleeps in a crib. She's not going to be able to get herself out safely. So my husband and I have talked about it, and I know that if there's a fire in the house, it's my husband's responsibility to go get my daughter and get her outside, and my responsibility is to get myself outside, because you don't want to have two people and have that confusion and trying to figure that out in that emergency. So whether it's a young child, whether it's someone with a disability, whether it's an older adult, whatever your situation may be, just have a plan for it so you know what to expect. And then, of course, just like every other skill, practice your plan. The more you practice it, the more it just becomes routine and the easier you can just react to that. Once you get outside to that meeting place and everyone is safe, remember, we can replace all of your stuff. There's no need to go back inside for anything. Firefighters, when they get there, luckily in Loudoun County, we have great response times. Let them go in there. They have all the protective gear. They will get, if it's a pet or anything like that, they will go in there and do their best to help. Once you're outside, please stay outside. And then, of course, calling 911. If someone hasn't already called 911, whether you have a cell phone with you or whether you need to go to the neighbor's house, get outside, call 911, wait for help to come. So another common thing that occurs in the home that people have questions about are carbon monoxide alarms. Oftentimes they're confused with smoke alarms and how they function differently. So carbon monoxide is an odorless, colorless gas. We can't see, smell, taste it, which is why it's so dangerous. And carbon monoxide comes from either gas-fueled appliances, so whether it's a wood stove or natural gas oven, anything like that, or an attached garage. So when those appliances don't fully burn that fuel properly, that's when CO occurs. Or in the garage if you're leaving your car running, something like that. So having a carbon monoxide alarm in a central location outside a sleeping area is essential to alert that family if it does start to sense CO. Obviously, we'll talk a little bit about the gold standard of if you can have one on every level of the home, that is ideal. But again, really the key is at least one outside any sleeping area. When it comes to installation, we always recommend that you utilize the manufacturer's instructions. You'll notice that the various types of carbon monoxide alarms, there's very different philosophies on where they should be located. Some are you plug in an outlet that are low to the ground. Sometimes there are carbon monoxide and smoke alarm combination alarms together, and that's on the ceiling. And so there's a lot of confusion as far as, well, where does it need to be located? How is this going to work? How do I install it? And the best thing to do is follow the manufacturer's instructions for how to properly mount it and place it, so it will work the most effective way possible. Now, when it comes to actually maintaining the carbon monoxide alarms, it's actually very similar to smoke alarms with a few kind of minor changes. So they need to be tested once a month. They need to have the batteries replaced. Now, the CO alarms will last probably more around 7 years. They could be as little as 5 years, as many as 7 years. The battery also needs to be replaced. Even if it plugs into the wall outlet, there's always a battery backup, whether it's a smoke alarm or a CO alarm, in case power is lost. If that alarm sounds, it's exceptionally critical that you get out as quickly as possible because you aren't able to smell and sense that danger. You need to get out and call the fire department. And with that, you want to make sure that you aren't opening all of the windows because that makes it very difficult for the fire department to isolate and identify what the source of that CO is. And when you call 911, the person that you talk to, the dispatcher, they will also provide basic pieces of information like that as well to you. A lot of the clean factors are the same. It will also have that label from an independent testing laboratory. So just be sure that you're following the manufacturer's instructions. And remember, a smoke alarm is not the same as a CO alarm. So you cannot interchange the two different types of alarms. Go ahead, Amanda. So another device people frequently ask about are fire extinguishers in the home. And should I have one? Where should they be? Um, the number one rule with a fire extinguisher is if you don't know how to use it properly or haven't ever had any kind of experience or training, it may not be best for you to utilize that fire extinguisher, because the time to learn how to use it is not in that emergency situation. So if you do decide to purchase a fire extinguisher, be sure that you are familiar with it, you understand how it works. So if you do choose to use it, you know how to use it efficiently and effectively. So some simple key factors are: the larger the fire extinguisher, the larger the fire it will put out. Now, does that mean you should buy a large one? Well, not necessarily. If you can't handle and maneuver the fire extinguisher, it's probably too big for you and you can't be effective with it. So then you would need to purchase a smaller one. Fire extinguishers are only meant for a smaller contained fire. It's not made to put out a large, if there's a large portion of a room or anything like that, they're not made to put out that size fire. The fire extinguishers also have that label of an independent testing laboratory. On the fire extinguisher itself, it does have not only the instructions, but lots of basic information about the fire extinguisher itself. So being familiar with all of those components is very important before a fire actually occurs. Any fire extinguisher should be placed near an exit. So another sort of guideline we provide to people, that if you are going to use a fire extinguisher, you need to be sure that you have a safe way to exit the home. So fire likes to travel up and then over the top, and then it kind of comes down behind you. And so we don't want you to get stuck because your exit is behind you. So make sure that you always have that space. You have a way out if you do choose to utilize a fire extinguisher. In that same realm, fire produces a lot of smoke. So if you can't breathe properly, and even the type of fire extinguisher may have a dry chemical in it, you are now putting yourself at risk. So if you don't feel safe, get out of the house. Please call us right away. Make sure we're coming even before you use the fire extinguisher, so we can be sure that we get that fire out so it doesn't grow any larger. Now, there are several different types of fire extinguishers and types of fires. The most common you will see if you were to go to a home improvement store would be an A, B, C fire extinguisher or a K fire extinguisher. So an A, B, or an C, that focuses on common flammables within the home. So whether Class A is your typical combustibles of cloth, wood, paper, a lot of different plastics, that's a Class A. Class B is going to be lots of things that are like flammable liquids, like gas, oil, paints, things like that. And then a Class C is going to be focused more on electrical equipment. So most fire extinguishers you're going to find are going to be an A, B, and C, because that's the most common hazards we see in the home. D, you generally will not see because that's specific to flammable metals. And most homes, unless you have a specialty as your occupation, you're not going to find that in your home. And then the K classification is focused more on kitchen-related fires, grease fires, fats, oils, that type of thing. So it's very specific to kitchens itself. Based on the location of your fire extinguisher, it may determine which you prefer to use. At the end of the day, if you utilize an ABC fire extinguisher, that can be utilized in the kitchen, it can be utilized in the garage, near a fireplace, really anywhere in your home that could be used. Each type of extinguisher and manufacturer is going to have different instructions for proper maintenance. It will let you know, can you recharge this device, or once it meets its expiration date, do you just need to get rid of it, and how to get rid of it safely. Understand that if you use the fire extinguisher, do you have a plan if it doesn't work and you need to be able to get out of that home safely? So only use a fire extinguisher under 4 conditions. 1, it is confined to that small space and is not growing any larger, because fire grows fast. Have you alerted to everyone inside the building and making sure that everyone is starting to get out of the home safely? Has the fire department been called? Make sure that they're being called, because every minute can count. And then also the room is not filled with smoke, causing a potential health hazard for you. So if those 4 articles are not met, you probably should consider not using the fire extinguisher and getting out safely and initiating those safety steps. So when it comes to operating the fire extinguisher, pass is how we remind people this is how you utilize the device. So in the fire extinguisher, there's a pin that needs to be pulled out. That is going to allow you to squeeze later on. So you're going to pull that out, that locking mechanism out. The second thing you're going to do is aim low at the base of the fire. And you're going to be standing probably about 6 to 8 feet away from the fire as you're aiming down low at the base of the fire. Then at that point, because you've now pulled out that locking mechanism and you squeeze the handle, as you squeeze that out, that's going to open the chamber to allow the, whether it's dry chem or whatever the type of extinguisher is, that's going to start releasing the product. And then you're going to sweep side to side and you are going to use the entire fire extinguisher. Don't stop just because the fire seems to go out and be gone. Continue and disperse the entire canister. Make sure it's completely empty before you stop. Oftentimes fires like to flare back up. So, we talked about the home escape plan, smoke alarms, carbon monoxide, and fire extinguishers. But ultimately, at the end of the day, a lot of the fires that do actually occur are related to human nature and human errors that we make, and they can be preventable. So as you are looking at your house and trying to identify, hey, how can I be safer? Think about your habits and how can you change those habits to make sure that you're engaging in safer actions. So the most common place we're going to see fires is the kitchen, right? You have your oven, your stove, microwave, toaster, all sorts of heating appliances that when that hot gets next to any type of fuel can easily start a fire. So staying in the kitchen while cooking, it's so easily nowadays to get distracted with the technology and the phone ringing and kids are running around. Making sure that you stay in the kitchen while you're cooking, because especially hot oil can easily overheat and start a fire. Keeping that area free of any debris, whether it's food packaging or oven mitts laying around that don't need to be out, towels, hand towels, making sure that those are clear and away from any of those hot surfaces as well. Electrical safety or electrical related fires are actually a very high incidence here in Loudoun County. I believe it's in probably our top 2 when it comes to accidental fires. And so we just want to encourage people, if you see a cord that's hot to the touch, if it's frayed, if it's damaged, placing them under rugs where you may not be able to see that damage is definitely not a good idea. So if you see those types of things, you need to replace that cord, have an electrician come and put in a new outlet if you find yourself using extension cords in order to have that issue addressed so we don't have that hazard anymore. A lot of times with all the electronics we have, we plug in so many things now. So utilizing multi-prong adapters or surge protectors is a very good way to help protect your home from having those large consumptions of electrical activity. Any appliances, because they utilize such a large amount of power, they should be plugged directly into wall outlets. They shouldn't be using extension cords. Extension cords aren't meant or rated for long-term use. They're meant to be up temporary, so maybe a week or 2, maybe up to 30 days, but extension cords are meant for short-term use. With all the cold weather we're having right now, we have probably all turned on our heating up extra high, whether you use a pellet stove or anything like that. We want to be sure that those get cleaned regularly, they get inspected by a professional regularly, and that it's functioning the way it needs to be functioning. Often that's another one of those devices that we take for granted and we forget to have it cleaned or have it checked, but it's really critical that it functions properly when we need it. We have someone ask that says, hey, I live in an apartment with other people and can I share this with them? Absolutely. And they, if they want to reach out to me directly, you'll have my contact information here soon. Contact me with any questions, concerns, whether it's about general home safety, whether it's about coming out for a presentation, whether you have questions about your particular situation and smoke alarms. We have all of that resources here for you. A fireplace. Oh, can you go back, please, Amanda? Thank you. If you do have any type of fireplace or open flame, even outside, if you have a chimney or a fire pit, making sure that there is a mesh screen that prevents embers from coming out of that. And of course, whether it's on the grass or whether it's in the house on carpeting, or any other object that's flammable, we want to be sure that that mesh screen is there to help keep that inside where it's supposed to be. All right, Amanda, thank you. Making sure that anything that gets hot stays 3 feet away from anything that can burn. And it could be something as simple as a candle or a lamp, or something more complex like a generator or a lawnmower that's hot after being in use, and you're storing it away in the garage next to a stack of oil rigs or something. Be aware of your surroundings, and basic housekeeping and tidiness will help you prevent that type of thing from happening unintentionally. Some individuals may utilize space heaters. Space heaters also have that independent label on it, which more current space heaters, if space heaters get tipped over, they will actually automatically have a shutoff function. So they won't continue to produce heat, knowing that, hey, if it tipped over, there's a good chance it may be touching something that can burn. Individuals use candles for a variety of purposes, whether it's religious purposes or just the ambiance, making sure that wherever they're placed, that they're in sturdy containers, they're placed on surfaces that won't tip over. And this goes with any type of religious ritual. Maybe you're not using a candle, maybe you're using a different wick of some kind, where you ignite it, making sure that that's on a stable surface and it cannot spread, it's not near any flammable materials. And that the flame itself, when you are leaving the room or going to bed, gets completely extinguished. Kind of like the cooking safety, we'll leave the room and we'll get distracted doing something, and then that candle or that item will continue to have that flame, and something as simple as the windows open and it blows a curtain can start that fire. Smoking safety is actually one of our top accidental fire causes here in the county. It generally is, I believe it also has the highest amount of damages that we've come across. And that is because smokers are smoking outside, which is great. What we see most commonly here in Loudoun is that they are not disposed of in an appropriate container. So people put it in mulch, they may put it in a flower bed, a flower pot, a cardboard box. I could probably name a bunch of other items, but we need to be sure that when we're disposing of smoking materials, that we do that in a metal or ceramic container filled with sand, and that container gets cleaned out regularly. We've had fires where people were smoking outside, they were putting it in the appropriate container, but they never cleaned it. And unfortunately, that caused a fire at that particular homeowner's house. So being aware of those things and getting into those healthy habits. Go ahead, Amanda. So other things to be aware of around the house, basic emergency preparedness, kind of in the area, whether it's natural disasters or other things that could occur, basic first aid, CPR. Do you have some basic skill sets where, we're more likely to probably experience a medical emergency than a fire? And do you have some of those basic skills where you can provide assistance to someone if they need it? Storage of basic cleaners, chemicals, poisoning, slips, trips, and falls around the house are all things to keep in mind as you're kind of going through your home and trying to identify, hey, what can I do to stay safer going forward? Go ahead, Amanda. So here is my contact information. So I work for Loudoun County Fire Rescue. That's their main information number. You can also go online to our website, which is loudoun.gov/fire, and there's all sorts of resources there. I have lots of fire safety information posted on there. We also have a kids corner for kids who are interested in learning about, hey, firefighters and their gear and fire trucks. We have a YouTube page with all sorts of videos and information and all of that good stuff. And then there's my information. If you have the specific questions about smoke alarms or anything that we talked about today, you can call or email me, and I will provide, the best feedback that I can. Because I know sometimes there's some of those little nuances and other questions that we tend to forget about, or we'll like, well, my situation isn't quite like that, so how do I adjust? Um, the one last thing I want to mention is that Loudoun County alarm assessment program, where any resident that lives in the county can give me a call and say, hey, I would like my smoke alarms tested by firefighters and I want to make sure that they're working properly. I'm not sure if they need to be replaced, or I'm not sure how to do it myself. You can give either of these, use either the phone number or the email to contact me, and I can put you in touch with the station that serves your area, and they'll come out, they'll test the smoke alarms, make sure that they're working. They'll have a conversation about the battery, making sure that gets replaced. They'll make sure that they're not outdated. They may provide recommendations if you need additional alarms. If you have questions about safety around the house, they can give you tips on things like that as well. So keep that in mind if you have questions, concerns after this, and you want to have your smoke alarms checked out. We do have a smoke alarm program. That's a free program. There's no cost to the homeowner or the renter for that. If individuals do need it, we do provide battery powered smoke alarms for individuals who cannot afford them. So that's always an option available to members of the community as well. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you, Lisa, for that wonderful presentation. We're just going to quickly wrap some things up, and then we do have 2 questions for you in the chat box. So just to sum everything up for everyone, we talked about how you should have a working fire extinguisher if you know how to use it in your house, that smoke alarm and that carbon monoxide alarm as well. It's important to develop and practice your home escape plan with your family and do that regularly. And then take the time to go ahead and walk through your house and look at all those other fire safety tips that Lisa mentioned, like the candles and the extension cords and those sort of things, and make sure that you're protecting your home against fire. All right, Lisa, the 2 questions that we had for you in the chat box, actually, we just had one more that came through. So the first one is it safe to vape inside the house?
So I would have to recommend looking up I have not had any research or data stating one way or the other. What I would recommend is going to the vaping manufacturer and looking at some of, everything now, right, has that instruction manual to be, take a look at that and see what safety recommendations that they have in place, and what they recommend as far as the proper use and maintenance of that vaping device.
Great. The second question is, do you have any suggestions about dryer safety? So the lint in your dryer and cleaning it out and things like that, and how that might prevent a fire.
So that is definitely something that we've seen here in the county on occasion. So the importance of always, every time that you complete a load of laundry in the dryer, making sure that you're cleaning out that lint trap. Some dryers have 2 lint traps, so sometimes you have to look in 2 different places to get that clean. But also the vent that actually goes to the outside also needs to be cleaned regularly. So some people are DIY people and they'll do it themselves. Some people have a service come out and do it. But doing that, it's hard to give you a time frame of how often that needs to occur. If you're doing lots of laundry, it happens to happen a little bit more frequently than if you're a single individual at home, not doing as much. So you really have to just kind of be aware of your habits and what you're doing to say, hey, this is my indication that now I need to go have that checked.
Great. And then the last question for you is, one of our viewers said that he heard on the news about an explosion in Fairfax County. It sounds like it might have been with gas. Do you know how you could avoid some sort of explosion with gas, or is there anything else you could suggest about how to handle a situation like that?
So when it comes to gas, so there's some people sometimes can confuse the different types of fuel. So a lot of times people say, hey, I smell gas. Well, from a firefighter standpoint, when someone utilizes the term gas, I'm thinking gasoline. We all know that there's gas appliances. So you have natural gas, you have propane that also fuel. Propane, natural gas have a chemical in it called mercaptan, which has that's that rotten egg smell that none of us really like to have, which is great because they intentionally do that. So when there is a leak or something like that, we're aware of it and we can call and get the resources that we need to address it. Which is different from the gas of carbon monoxide, which we can't smell, see, taste, and all that jazz. So by properly maintaining your devices, your appliances, and making sure that if you do have an oven that you're shutting it off completely, something as simple as, I know I've caught myself doing it in the past where I will bump into the knobs on my oven and will accidentally turn the gas on, but it doesn't ignite it because I don't, I just turn it enough to turn it on a little bit, and that will identify it. They also have like a carbon monoxide alarm. They also have carbon monoxide and natural gas and other gas alarms as well. So you could have the option of purchasing one of those and including that into your home as well.
That's great. Okay, I think that wraps up all of our questions for today. So thank you, Lisa, for joining us. I really enjoyed the presentation. I know I learned quite a lot, actually. I hope everybody else did as well. Like we mentioned in the chat box, our presentation is being recorded, so it will be up on our website within the next few days. So if you wanted to share this presentation with anybody else in your family, friends, neighbors, please go ahead and do that. We definitely want to make sure that everyone is as safe as possible. And we'll have more free workshops coming up soon. So on February 18th at 6 p.m., our next workshop will be discussing building your family emergency toolkit. So we'd love for you to join us for that discussion, and we hope to see you all soon. Thank you.